City building games are the kind of games that people play for completely different reasons. Some play them because they're relaxing, others play them because they love planning every little detail and turning chaos into something organized. Personally, I could easily spend hundreds of hours in a single city builder without even realizing where the time went. Watching a tiny settlement slowly evolve into a massive city is just way too satisfying. So today, we're looking at 20 city building games that are still absolutely worth playing and can keep you hooked for countless hours. So with that said, let's get started. Timberborn. What if humanity disappeared and the world belonged entirely to beavers? That's exactly the idea behind Timberborn, and somehow it works incredibly well. Instead of building cities for humans, you're creating an entire civilization for highly intelligent beavers. But don't let the cute animals fool you. This game can become surprisingly complex. The biggest mechanic here is water management. During wet seasons, rivers flow normally, but when droughts hit, the land begins drying out and your city can quickly collapse if you're not prepared. You'll need to build dams, floodgates, irrigation canals, and reservoirs to keep your colony alive. Wood turns into planks, planks become machinery, and eventually your simple village transforms into a highly efficient industrial system. On top of that, there are two completely different beaver factions with unique technologies and playstyles. And honestly, watching the water flow through a system that you built yourself never stops feeling satisfying. After beavers, we're jumping straight into the Industrial Revolution. Anno 1800 takes place during an era of factories, steam engines, trade, and rapidly growing cities. And honestly, the setting alone already makes it worth checking out. Your population isn't just one giant group of people. Different social classes have completely different needs. Workers might simply ask for food and basic supplies, but as your city grows, citizens become more demanding. Suddenly, they want luxury clothing, newspapers, coffee, cigars, and far more complex products. This creates one of the deepest production systems in the entire genre. Iron ore becomes steel, steel becomes engines, and engines eventually become parts of massive industrial operations involving dozens of connected systems. You're also constantly managing trade routes and naval ships while expanding into entirely new territories. Establishing colonies in the New World introduces new resources and completely changes your economy. And one of the best things about Anno 1800, watching your industrial city covered in smokestacks and busy streets somehow looks incredibly beautiful. Surviving Mars. At some point in life, almost everyone has imagined living on Mars. Surviving Mars lets you turn that dream into reality, but surviving there is much harder than you might expect. You begin with almost nothing and slowly create a functioning human colony on the red planet. Every decision matters because every system is connected. You need oxygen, food, water, electricity, and heat just to keep people alive. But the real challenge starts when disasters happen. Dust storms can cut off solar power, meteor showers can destroy buildings, and a single broken life support network can cause a chain reaction that destroys everything. You'll manage drones that automatically construct and repair structures while deciding which technologies to unlock through an extensive research tree. The colonists themselves also have individual personalities. One person might suffer from claustrophobia, while another prefers working alone. That human factor turns the game from a simple building simulator into something that sometimes feels like a colony survival drama. And seeing those small domes eventually turn into a self-sustaining Martian city feels incredibly rewarding. Manor Lords. Manor Lords might be one of the most immersive medieval city builders ever created. Unlike many games in the genre, you're not forced into strict grids or perfectly square layouts. You can place roads and buildings almost anywhere, which makes villages grow naturally instead of feeling artificial. Your citizens also have real daily routines. You can literally watch villagers harvest crops, carry grain to storage houses, transport flour to mills, and wait in line at bakeries. Because every production chain is fully visible, you can immediately understand where problems are happening. Maybe a farm is too far from storage. Maybe transport is slowing down your economy. The game also includes taxation systems, regional management, and population growth mechanics. There are battles too, but honestly, the biggest attraction is simply watching your village grow organically into a living medieval settlement. Looking over your lands from above genuinely makes you feel like a medieval lord. Tropico 6 somehow manages to be both hilarious and surprisingly deep at the same time. As El Presidente of a Caribbean island nation, you're balancing politics, economics, and public opinion while trying to stay in power. You can build housing, industries, transportation systems, farms, and tourism centers. But every decision creates consequences. Want beautiful beach resorts for tourists? Great, but your factories might create pollution nearby. Want more industry? Environmental groups probably won't be happy. Different factions constantly demand different things. Religious groups care about morality, environmentalists want cleaner cities, and wealthy citizens have completely different priorities. Managing all these competing interests can become chaotic in the best possible way. And because every historical era changes the economy and available technology, every playthrough feels different. Cities Skylines. After SimCity disappointed a lot of players back in 2013, Cities Skylines basically stepped in and saved the entire genre. Road design is the true heart of the game. What starts as simple streets eventually becomes massive highway systems, interchanges, roundabouts, and public transportation networks. Traffic itself almost turns into an engineering puzzle. Then there's zoning, residential, commercial, and industrial districts all depend on each other and create their own economic cycles. You'll also manage water systems, waste processing, electricity grids, hospitals, schools, emergency services, and almost every part of a modern city. And the mod support is absolutely insane. Players have recreated real cities from around the world with incredible detail. Watching your city hit hundreds of thousands of citizens and seeing everything function together feels amazing. This game basically became the modern standard for city building games. Frostpunk takes city building and turns it into something much darker, a moral crisis. This isn't just about building houses and collecting resources. This game constantly asks one question: how far are you willing to go to keep your city alive? Set in a frozen world where humanity is on the edge of extinction, your entire city revolves around a giant heat generator sitting at the center of your settlement. Every road, every home, and every workplace expands outward from it, like a desperate attempt to fight against nature itself. Coal becomes your most valuable resource because without heat, people die. But keeping everyone alive isn't simple. You'll eventually face brutal choices. Should children work in factories? Should exhausted workers be forced into 24-hour emergency shifts? Do you lead with hope or fear? Then come the storms. Temperatures suddenly drop to terrifying levels, forcing you to shut down districts, redirect heat zones, and desperately stockpile supplies before everything freezes. And when the giant blizzard finally arrives while your citizens gather around the generator praying for survival, Frostpunk becomes more than a city builder. It becomes something you'll remember long after finishing it. Banished proves that sometimes simplicity can be surprisingly brutal. You're leading a small group of exiles trying to survive in the wilderness. There's no money system, no armies, no social classes, and no epic wars. Your only concern is simple: do we have enough food, enough shelter, and enough firewood to survive another winter? But that simplicity is exactly what makes it dangerous. The game focuses less on complex systems and more on tiny mistakes that slowly destroy everything. Maybe your farmers become too old, and suddenly nobody is replacing them. Maybe you relied too much on a single crop, and a bad season wipes out your food supply. You spend a lot of time watching villagers walk across forests carrying logs, gathering berries, fishing near rivers, and slowly building a community from nothing. Banished isn't for players who want non-stop micromanagement. It's for players who enjoy observing systems, making small adjustments, and watching consequences unfold naturally. It feels less like a city builder and more like survival itself. Farthest Frontier feels like Banished evolved into something much deeper. You're building a medieval frontier town in an unforgiving world where danger constantly waits around the corner. Raiders attack your settlement, diseases spread through villages, and famine can destroy years of progress if you stop paying attention. The production chains here become incredibly detailed. Growing food isn't as simple as planting crops. You start with seeds, harvest wheat, transport it to mills, convert it into flour, and finally turn it into bread, and every single step can fail. Disease mechanics are also deeply connected to city planning. Dirty water, poor sanitation, and unmanaged waste can create outbreaks that spread through entire neighborhoods. As your settlement grows, you'll begin building walls, placing watchtowers, and organizing defensive forces to protect your people. Meanwhile, you're also balancing housing layouts, work efficiency, and population growth. It's one of those games where people quietly say, "Wait, why isn't everyone talking about this?" Aven Colony. A lot of city builders let you build in space, but Aven Colony stands out because of its atmosphere. You're establishing humanity's future on an alien world called Tau Chetifef, and from the moment you start building, everything feels different. Instead of traditional roads, your colony grows through connected tunnel systems and futuristic structures linked by giant tube networks. Managing your city isn't just about resources either. Colonists care about entertainment, safety, healthcare, and overall happiness. Unhappy citizens become less productive, which slowly creates problems throughout the entire colony. Resource extraction also works differently. Drone systems automatically gather materials and transport them around the city, making logistics feel more automated and futuristic. As the game progresses, strange alien organisms, toxic environments, and harsh weather conditions create new challenges. Watching your small outpost slowly become a massive connected sci-fi city feels incredibly satisfying, and it's also a great entry point if you want a city builder that isn't overwhelmingly complex. Against the Storm takes city building and mixes it with roguelite mechanics, and somehow it works ridiculously well. Instead of spending hundreds of hours building one giant city, you're creating multiple settlements between devastating storm cycles. Every run feels different. You build temporary villages deep inside dangerous forests while trying to gather resources before the next storm arrives. The game also features multiple races, and each one behaves differently. Humans prefer certain foods and comforts. Beavers are excellent at wood production. Harpies have their own housing preferences and needs. Managing all these groups at the same time creates constant strategic decisions. Resources, map layouts, and building options also change every run, forcing you to adapt instead of relying on one perfect strategy. And because permanent progression carries over between attempts, every failed settlement still pushes you forward. That feeling of barely saving a town moments before disaster hits feels unbelievably satisfying. It's probably one of the best examples of city building and roguelite mechanics working together. Workers and Resources, Soviet Republic. This game is serious, like really serious. Workers and Resources basically asks, what if we simulated an entire Soviet economy with almost ridiculous detail? And somehow, it actually does it. Resources exist as physical systems across the map. Maybe your iron mine is sitting in northern mountains while your steel factory is located far away in the south. Now you need roads, railways, trucks, and infrastructure connecting everything together. Electricity alone can become an entire challenge. Power lines have different capacities, and if you choose the wrong ones, half your city might suddenly lose power. Your citizens also need housing, education, healthcare, transportation, and jobs, all connected directly to production systems. Nothing magically appears. Everything must physically move from one place to another. Calling this one of the deepest economic simulators ever made honestly wouldn't be an exaggeration. You can sit down to play for 1 hour and somehow realize it's suddenly 3 a.m. Endzone, A World Apart. Building cities after the end of the world creates a completely different feeling. Endzone drops you into a post-apocalyptic wasteland where humanity is trying to survive after a nuclear disaster, and the environment itself constantly fights against you. Radioactive rain contaminates water sources, sandstorms destroy infrastructure, and polluted land can ruin your farming systems. You'll constantly monitor contamination maps before placing buildings and carefully manage filtered water supplies to keep people alive. Health and morale directly affect productivity too, meaning survival isn't just about collecting resources. The production systems become increasingly complex as your settlement expands from simple food gathering to energy production and industrial development. And the atmosphere here feels heavy. Gray skies, thick fog, and people desperately trying to rebuild civilization give the game a similar emotional weight to Frostpunk. For survival-focused city builder fans, this one deserves attention. The Crust. Most city builders let you build on Earth. The Crust basically says, what if we moved all of that underground on the moon? And surprisingly, that single idea changes almost everything. Instead of expanding across giant landscapes, you're digging deep beneath the lunar surface and creating an entire underground colony through massive tunnel networks. Every expansion feels like you're uncovering hidden parts of the moon itself, but survival isn't simple. Oxygen systems, power grids, mining operations, and living spaces are all connected. If energy production drops for even a short period, entire sections of your colony can suddenly begin failing. Resource extraction heavily relies on automation too. Mining robots drill through lunar rock and transport materials automatically. But there's a catch. You also need maintenance systems because machines break down. Your colonists aren't simply numbers either. They have physical and psychological needs that affect efficiency and productivity. The technology tree also adds important decisions. Do you invest in better mining systems, more efficient energy production, advanced life support? And as your tunnel network slowly expands into a massive underground lunar civilization, watching the entire colony come alive feels incredibly satisfying. If you're looking for a city builder that actually feels different, the Crust is one of those hidden gems worth paying attention to. Foundation takes one of the biggest rules in city building games and completely throws it out the window. No grids, no perfect squares, no forced layouts. Instead of building cities block by block, you create settlements that grow naturally, almost like real medieval towns. You place buildings freely, roads appear dynamically depending on where people walk, and suddenly your city starts developing its own personality. You'll build markets, churches, workshops, farms, and artisan districts while managing how everything connects together. Production chains become increasingly important too. Wood becomes planks Planks become furniture, stone becomes structures, and every profession relies on another part of your economy. Housing quality and service coverage also affect migration and population growth, meaning your city can't just expand endlessly without planning. Tax systems and immigration policies give you additional control over how quickly things evolve. But honestly, the most satisfying part isn't efficiency. It's zooming out and realizing your city doesn't look like something you built. It looks like something that grew on its own. For players who love creative freedom, Foundation feels incredibly rewarding. Whiskerwood. Sometimes you don't want stress. Sometimes you don't want disasters, collapsing economies, or angry citizens protesting outside your buildings. Sometimes you just want to relax. And that's exactly where Whiskerwood comes in. Instead of building giant industrial cities, you're creating a peaceful little community filled with adorable animal villagers. The entire experience feels cozy from beginning to end. You gather basic resources like wood, stone, and food, while placing homes and service buildings that improve happiness and productivity. But despite its relaxing atmosphere, there are still systems to manage. Season changes affect resource availability, meaning the supplies you easily collect during summer might suddenly become much harder to find once winter arrives. Watching tiny animal villagers walk around, carry materials, and slowly create a thriving settlement creates this weirdly satisfying feeling where hours disappear without you noticing. Whiskerwood isn't trying to overwhelm you, it's trying to give you a place to chill. And honestly, sometimes that's exactly what you need. SimCity 4. It's kind of crazy to think about this. SimCity 4 came out back in 2003, and people are still playing it. That alone says a lot. While many city builders focus on a single map, SimCity 4 introduced an entire regional system where multiple cities could interact with each other. One city might become an industrial center, while another focuses on residential areas or business districts. Taxes, zoning decisions, and infrastructure investments all have real economic consequences. Place your commercial districts in the wrong location, and suddenly your economy starts slowing down. Transportation also becomes a challenge of its own. You'll build bus networks, rail systems, subways, highways, and connect everything together so your city actually functions efficiently. As your population grows, balancing all these systems becomes increasingly complex. Sure, visually it might look old today, but thanks to community projects like Network Add-on Mod, players have transformed the game into something that still feels surprisingly modern. Even now, SimCity 4 remains one of the deepest and most satisfying city-building experiences ever made. Anno 2070. After spending time in the Industrial Revolution with Anno 1800, it's only natural to wonder, what happens if we push the series into the future? Well, Anno 2070 answers that question surprisingly well. Set in a world devastated by rising sea levels and climate change, much of Earth has disappeared beneath the ocean. Instead of building massive continents filled with cities, you're creating advanced colonies across scattered islands and coastlines. One of the coolest parts of the game is choosing between two major factions. Global Trust focuses on heavy industry and advanced technology, while Eden Initiative takes a more eco-friendly approach centered around sustainability and environmental balance. And these choices genuinely change how you play. You'll build underwater resource extraction facilities, create energy networks, manage population demands, and establish massive trade routes across oceans. As your cities expand, ships constantly move between islands transporting resources, while diplomacy and relationships with other factions add another layer of strategy. Compared to Anno 1800, this game definitely feels more niche. New Cycle. A lot of post-apocalyptic games focus on surviving the end of the world. New Cycle focuses on something different, rebuilding it. Humanity has already collapsed, and now you're starting from almost nothing, slowly dragging civilization back from the ground up. And that journey feels incredibly satisfying. You begin with primitive tools and basic survival systems, but over time your technology evolves step by step. You'll move from simple water mills to steam engines, and eventually into electricity and more advanced industrial systems. But greater technology doesn't automatically make life easier. Every advancement creates new challenges. Larger factories require more workers, more resources, and more infrastructure. Assign too many people to one industry, and suddenly your economy becomes unstable. Population happiness and workforce distribution constantly force you to think ahead. The game also adds a community system, where groups inside your settlement begin influencing decisions and developing their own needs. That human element gives the world a feeling that goes beyond simple resource management. New Cycle ended up being one of those unexpected games that quietly surprised a lot of city builder fans, and the gradual progression system makes every technological breakthrough feel rewarding. Kingdoms and Castles. If you've never played city builders before and want the perfect place to start, Kingdoms and Castles might honestly be one of the best options out there. The game takes complicated city building mechanics and presents them in a simple, approachable way without removing what makes the genre fun. You begin with a tiny medieval village and slowly transform it into a massive kingdom. At first, you're just placing houses, farms, and woodcutters. Simple enough, but as your population grows, new problems start appearing. People suddenly want churches, bathhouses, taverns, festivals, and better living conditions to stay happy. Then the game decides to remind you that peaceful kingdom life never lasts forever. Viking raids begin attacking your shores. Dragons suddenly appear and start setting entire districts on fire. Now tower placement, walls, and defensive layouts become incredibly important. Watching your small village evolve into a giant fortified kingdom feels surprisingly satisfying. And before you realize it, you've somehow been playing for 6 hours. Dwarf Fortress. Dwarf Fortress might be one of the most intimidating games ever created. And here's the funny part. For years it looked like spreadsheets fighting each other. The original version used ASCII graphics, meaning walls, characters, and objects were basically symbols and letters on your screen. But none of that mattered, because the stories this game creates are absolutely insane. You build and manage a dwarf fortress while digging deeper and deeper underground, never knowing what you're going to discover. Every dwarf is a fully simulated individual with personalities, fears, preferences, relationships, and memories. One dwarf might panic because of spiders. That panic spreads to another dwarf. Someone drops food. Another person starts a fight. Suddenly, half your fortress is having a complete mental breakdown. And somehow, all of this happens naturally. The resource systems and production chains are also ridiculously deep. Raw materials go through dozens of stages before becoming finished products. The newer Steam version finally added proper visuals and a more accessible interface, making it much easier for new players to get into. But underneath those improvements, the game is still what many people consider the ultimate city-building sandbox. It's not just a game, it's basically a chaos generator pretending to be a city builder's